She thought he'd abandon her after the accidental pregnancy, but he became her hero. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The rain hammered against the windows of Chicago General Hospital with the kind of fury that made even the bravest souls pause. Lauren Thomas pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching the storm rage outside while the emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos behind her. Another night, another shift that had stretched far beyond its intended hours. "Lauren, we've got incoming." Janelle's voice cut through the ambient noise of monitors and hurried conversations. "Multi-car accident on Lakeshore Drive, ETA 5 minutes. Lauren turned away from the window, her reflection briefly catching her eye. Exhausted brown eyes, natural hair pulled back in a practical bun, scrubs that had seen better days. At 29, she'd learned to read the signs of her own fatigue, but tonight felt different. Tonight, something electric charged the air beyond just the storm. "How many?" she called back to her best friend and colleague, already moving toward the supply closet. 4 confirmed, possibly more. Fire departments bringing them in. The automatic doors burst open with a whoosh of wind and rain. Lauren's breath caught as the first responders rushed in, their reflective gear gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Leading the team was a man whose presence seemed to command the storm itself, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair dampened by rain and eyes the color of steel in sunlight. "Female, mid-20s, possible internal bleeding," he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos, BP dropping, pulse weak but stable. Lauren fell into step beside the gurney, her hands already assessing the patient's condition. "What's your name?" she asked the firefighter, needing to establish communication protocol. "Beckett Hayes," he replied, never taking his eyes off the patient. She was conscious at the scene, kept asking about her daughter. "Little girl's in the ambulance behind us. Minor cuts, mostly scared." Something in his voice, the way it softened when he mentioned the child, made Lauren look at him more closely. There was pain there, old and deep, carefully controlled but never quite hidden. The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures and careful coordination. Lauren found herself repeatedly working alongside Beckett, their movements synchronized as if they'd done this dance 100 times before. When the last patient was stabilized and the paperwork completed, she discovered him sitting in the break room, still in his uniform, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. "Rough night," she ventured, settling into the chair across from him. He looked up, and for the first time she saw him truly smile. It transformed his entire face, softening the harsh lines carved by whatever ghosts he carried. "Is there any other kind in this job?" "Fair point." Lauren found herself returning his smile. "I'm Lauren Thomas, physical therapy, but I help out in emergency when things get crazy." "Beckett Hayes, and thank you for tonight. You were—" He paused, searching for words. "You made a difference." "We all did. That's what we're here for." "Is it?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "And sometimes I wonder if we're just trying to fix things that can't be fixed, save people who don't want to be saved." Lauren studied his face, seeing the exhaustion that went deeper than one difficult shift. "Bad day, bad year," he admitted, then seemed surprised by his own honesty. "Sorry, you don't need to hear this." "Actually, I do." The words came out before she could stop them. "I mean, we all need someone to hear us sometimes." The storm outside had begun to quiet, but neither of them moved to leave. They talked through the remainder of Lauren's shift, about work, about Chicago, about everything except the weight they both carried. When the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, Lauren realized she hadn't thought about her own problems once in the past several hours. "I should go," Beckett said finally, but he made no move to stand. "Should is a dangerous word," Lauren replied. "It's what we tell ourselves when we're about to do something we don't really want to do." He laughed, a real laugh that reached his eyes. "You're dangerous, Lauren Thomas." "Dangerous how?" "You make it seem possible to hope again." The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Lauren felt something shift in her chest. A wall she'd built brick by careful brick beginning to show its first crack. "Do hope's not the enemy," she said softly. "Fear is. And what are you afraid of?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She thought of all the people who had promised to stay and hadn't, all the times she'd been left to pick up the pieces alone. "Everything," she whispered. Beckett reached across the table, his fingers barely touching hers. "Me too." In that moment, with the storm clearing outside and the hospital settling into its quiet morning rhythm, Lauren felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the possibility that she wasn't meant to face the world alone. 3 weeks later, that possibility had grown into something neither of them had expected. Lauren stared at the plastic stick in her trembling hands, the 2 pink lines as clear and unmistakable as a neon sign. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind, bouncing off walls she'd built around her heart, walls that suddenly felt paper-thin. She thought of Beckett's laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he'd started showing up at the hospital even when he wasn't on call, always with some excuse about checking on a patient, but really just to see her. She thought of the night they'd spent talking until sunrise, and the night after that, when talking had turned into something else entirely. Something tender and desperate and completely unexpected. Now, sitting in her small apartment with the pregnancy test in her hands, Lauren felt the familiar weight of abandonment settling over her shoulders like an old, unwelcome coat. This was how it always went. This was where they always left. Her phone buzzed with a text from Beckett. "Thinking about you. Dinner tonight?" Lauren stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you tell someone that you're carrying their child when you're already preparing for them to walk away? How do you say the words that will change everything when everything has a history of changing for the worse? She set the phone down without responding and walked to her bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her was strong, independent, successful, everything she'd built herself to be after a childhood of broken promises. But she was also scared, and for the first time in years, she wasn't sure her strength would be enough. Outside her window, Chicago hummed with its usual urban symphony. People were living their lives, making their choices, building their futures. And somewhere in the city, Beckett Hayes was probably finishing his shift, maybe thinking about her, maybe not. Either way, Lauren knew that by tomorrow, everything would be different. She picked up her phone and typed back, "We need to talk." The die was cast. The storm that had brought them together was nothing compared to the one that was about to begin. Lauren had rehearsed the conversation 100 times in her mind, but sitting across from Beckett in the small Italian restaurant he'd chosen, all her carefully planned words evaporated like morning mist. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying too much for too long, but his eyes lit up when he saw her, and that familiar flutter in her chest made everything more complicated. "Do you look like you've seen a ghost?" he said gently, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "What's wrong?" The simple concern in his voice nearly undid her. Lauren had learned to expect indifference, casual cruelty, or at best, polite distance. Genuine care still caught her off guard, made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "I'm pregnant." The words tumbled out without preamble, stark and raw in the warm lighting of the restaurant. Beckett's hand stilled on hers, his expressions cycling through surprise, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite read. "Pregnant," he repeated quietly, as if testing the weight of the word. "I know this isn't what you signed up for," Lauren rushed on, the words coming faster now that the dam had broken. "I know this complicates everything, and I'm not expecting anything from you. I just thought you should know." Beckett was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Around them, the restaurant continued its gentle buzz of conversation and clinking silverware, but their table felt suspended in its own bubble of tension. "How far along?" he asked finally. 6 weeks, give or take." "And you're sure?" Lauren nodded, pulling her hand back to wrap both arms around her middle, a protective gesture she wasn't even aware of making. "I took 3 tests, saw a doctor yesterday. Okay. Beckett leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. Okay, we can handle this. The word "we" hit Lauren like a physical blow. She'd been so prepared for rejection, for him to walk away or demand she handle it alone, that his automatic inclusion of himself in the equation left her speechless. "We," she managed. "Of course, we." His brow furrowed as if her question confused him. "Oh, Lauren, did you think I would just disappear?" "Yes," she admitted, the honesty burning her throat. "That's exactly what I thought." Something shifted in Beckett's expression, a flash of pain that he quickly masked. "Who left you?" The question was so direct, so unexpectedly perceptive, that Lauren felt her defenses crumble. "Everyone," she whispered. "My father when I was 7. My mother, emotionally. After that, foster families, boyfriends. Everyone leaves, Beckett. It's what people do. Not everyone. Everyone who matters." Beckett leaned forward again, his voice intense. "I'm not going anywhere, Lauren. This baby, our baby, changes things, yes, but it doesn't change how I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" The question escaped before she could stop it, vulnerable and desperate. He was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years, and you're the first deep breath I've been able to take." Lauren felt tears sting her eyes. "You don't understand. I'm not the kind of woman men stay for. I'm the kind they leave behind when something better comes along." "Then you've been with the wrong men." "Have I?" The challenge in her voice surprised them both. "Or am I just the wrong woman?" Beckett reached for her hands again, holding them firmly when she tried to pull away. "Listen to me. My wife died 3 years ago in a car accident. I thought I was done. With love, with hoping, with believing that good things could happen to people like me. Then I met you, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want a future." Lauren's breath caught. He'd never mentioned his wife before, never talked about his past in anything but vague terms. The revelation hung between them, heavy with grief and possibility. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "about your wife. Her name was Amanda. She was a teacher, wanted kids more than anything." His voice was steady, but Lauren could see the cost of the words in the tension around his eyes. "We tried for 2 years before the accident. After she died, I thought that door was closed forever. And now I'm terrified and grateful and completely unprepared, but I want this. I want you. I want our baby." He squeezed her hands. "The question is, what do you want?" Lauren stared at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, scarred from years of rescue work, but gentle as they held her trembling fingers. What did she want? For years, she'd told herself she wanted independence, success, the ability to rely on no one but herself. But sitting here, looking into the face of a man who seemed determined to prove her wrong about everything she believed about love and loss, she realized those things had been shields more than goals. "I want to believe you," she said finally, "but I don't know how." "Then let me show you." His voice was soft but firm. "One day at a time, let me show you that some people stay. What if you change your mind? What if this all becomes too much? What if I don't? What if this becomes the best thing that ever happened to both of us?" Lauren looked around the restaurant, at the couples sharing meals and conversation, at the life happening all around them. For 29 years, she'd been a spectator to other people's happiness, convinced it wasn't meant for her. But maybe she'd been wrong. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "The relationship thing, the pregnancy thing, any of it. Good thing we can figure it out together." "Together," she repeated, testing the word the way he had tested pregnant. "Together," he confirmed. "If you'll let me." Lauren felt something crack open in her chest, some long-held breath finally released. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the possibility of trust. It was the recognition that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face this alone. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay, we'll try. Together." Beckett's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Together," he repeated, like a promise. As they left the restaurant that night, Lauren felt the weight of her secret lifted but replaced by something equally heavy. Hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It made you vulnerable, made you believe in possibilities that might not exist. But as Beckett's hand found hers in the cool Chicago evening, Lauren thought that maybe, for the first time in her life, the risk might be worth it. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and frightening and full of potential. Lauren had spent so many years preparing for abandonment that she'd forgotten how to prepare for the opposite. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things couldn't be prepared for, only lived through, together. Beckett's childhood home sat in Lincoln Park like a monument to old Chicago money, red brick, ivy-covered, with windows that gleamed like watchful eyes. Lauren felt distinctly out of place as they walked up the stone pathway, her simple sundress suddenly feeling inadequate despite Beckett's reassurances. "Ah, they're going to love you," he said for the third time, but Lauren caught the tension in his voice. "You don't sound convinced." Beckett stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "My family can be complicated, but what matters is us, okay? What we're building together." Lauren nodded, though her stomach churned with more than morning sickness. At 10 weeks pregnant, her body was changing in ways that felt foreign and miraculous all at once. Some days she felt powerful, connected to something ancient and feminine. Other days, like today, she felt like she was losing herself piece by piece. The front door opened before they could knock, revealing a woman in her early 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and the kind of understated elegance that came from generations of privilege. Margaret Hayes looked like she'd stepped out of a country club catalogue, and her smile was just a degree too bright to be genuine. "Beckett, darling!" She embraced her son with practiced affection before turning her attention to Lauren. "And you must be Lauren. We've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Lauren replied, extending her hand. Margaret's handshake was firm but brief. "Of course. Come in, come in. Charles is in his study, but he'll be out shortly." The interior of the house was exactly what Lauren had expected. Tasteful antiques, oil paintings, Persian rugs that probably cost more than her annual salary. Everything screamed old money and older traditions. She felt like an intruder in a museum. "So, Lauren," Margaret said as they settled in the formal living room, "Beckett tells us you're a physical therapist. How lovely. Such important work, helping people recover." There was something in the way she said "important" that made it sound like she was complimenting a child's finger painting. Lauren forced a smile. "I enjoy it. There's something satisfying about helping people regain their strength, their independence." "Independence," Margaret repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I imagine that's quite important to you." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Lauren felt Beckett tense beside her, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "Mother," he said quietly, a warning in his voice. "What?" "I simply meant that career women today value their independence so highly. It's admirable, really." Charles Hayes chose that moment to enter the room, saving Lauren from having to formulate a response. Beckett's father was a distinguished man in his late 60s, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His handshake was warmer than his wife's, but his eyes were equally assessing. "Lauren, welcome to our home. Beckett speaks of you constantly. Thank you for having me, Mr. Hayes. Please, call me Charles. We're practically family now, aren't we?" The words should have been welcoming, but something in his tone suggested they weren't entirely pleased about this development. Lauren wondered how much they knew, whether Beckett had told them about the pregnancy yet. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Crystal glasses, china plates, more forks than any reasonable person needed. The conversation flowed around topics Lauren could barely contribute to. Mutual friends, society events, business dealings that sounded more like social obligations than actual work. "And how is the foundation doing, dear?" Margaret asked Beckett as the main course was served. "The board meeting is next week, isn't it?" "Fine, Mother. Same as always." "You know, Lauren," Charles said, turning his attention to her, "Beckett's quite the philanthropist. The Hayes Foundation has been supporting various causes for over 50 years. Amanda was particularly passionate about education initiatives. The mention of Beckett's deceased wife fell like a stone into still water, ripples of awkwardness spreading across the table. Lauren saw Beckett's jaw tighten, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "That's wonderful," Lauren managed. "It's important to give back to the community." "Indeed," Margaret agreed. Amanda understood that. She grew up in a family much like ours, old Chicago, you know. She understood the responsibilities that come with privilege. The implication was clear. Lauren didn't understand, because Lauren wasn't from their world. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "I think anyone can understand the importance of helping others, regardless of their background." "Of course," Charles said quickly, shooting his wife a look. Margaret simply meant that it helps to have context, to understand the complexities of philanthropic work, the complexities of writing checks, Lauren asked sweetly. Beckett coughed, possibly hiding a laugh. Margaret's smile grew even more brittle. "Well, there's certainly more to it than that," she said. "Strategic planning, understanding which causes will have the most impact, building relationships with other donors. It requires a certain sophistication." Lauren set down her fork carefully. "I see. And what criteria do you use to determine which causes deserve your sophistication?" "Lauren," Beckett said quietly, but she was done being polite. "No, I'm genuinely curious. Do you prioritize causes that help people like you, or do you ever consider causes that help people like me?" The silence stretched taut as a wire. Margaret's face had gone pale, while Charles looked like he was calculating the potential damage to family relations. "I think," Margaret said finally, "that we all want to help deserving people." "Deserving," Lauren repeated. "That's an interesting word choice." "What my mother means," Beckett began, but Lauren cut him off. "I know what she means, Beckett. I've been hearing what she means my entire life." She turned back to Margaret. "And let me save us all some time. Yes, I grew up poor. Yes, I'm black. Yes, I worked my way through school without family money or connections. And yes, I'm pregnant with your son's child." The last words dropped like a bomb. Margaret's water glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against her plate. Charles went very still, his lawyer's instincts probably calculating the implications. "Pregnant," Margaret whispered. Beckett's hand found Lauren's under the table, solid and warm. "Yes, Mother, we're having a baby." "Well," Charles said after a long moment, "this is certainly unexpected news." "Unexpected," Lauren said, standing up, "but not unwelcome. At least, not to me and Beckett." She looked down at Beckett, whose face was a mixture of pride and apology. "I think I'll wait in the car." "Lauren, don't," he started, but she was already walking away. "It was lovely meeting you both," she called over her shoulder. "Thank you for the dinner and the warm welcome." She made it to Beckett's car before the tears came, hot and angry, and tinged with the disappointment she'd thought she was prepared for. This was why she didn't let people in. This was why she built walls. Because even when someone promised to stand by you, their family could still make you feel like an intruder in your own life. Beckett found her there 20 minutes later, his face grim but determined. "I'm sorry," he said as he got into the driver's seat. "They were completely out of line." "Were they?" Lauren stared out the window at the perfect house with its perfect facade. "Or were they just saying what you've been thinking but haven't had the courage to say?" "Lauren, look at me." When she didn't respond, he reached over and gently turned her face toward his. "And I left them sitting at that table. I walked out of my childhood home because they disrespected the woman I love and the child we're going to have together." "The woman you love?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "Yes," he said simply. "I love you, Lauren Thomas. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you refuse to let anyone make you feel small. I love that our child is going to have your courage and your heart. But your family will learn to accept us, or they'll lose me." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You and this baby are my family now. Everything else is secondary." Lauren searched his face, looking for signs of doubt or regret, but found only determination and something that looked remarkably like love. For the first time since she'd walked into that house, she felt like she could breathe. "I love you too," she whispered, "even though it terrifies me." "Good," he said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. The best things in life should be a little terrifying. As they drove away from the Hayes family home, Lauren felt something shift inside her. She still didn't know how to trust completely, still carried the scars of every abandonment she'd ever experienced. But maybe love wasn't about perfect trust. Maybe it was about choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing to build something new together even when the world seemed determined to tear it down. Maybe it was about creating the family you never had, instead of trying to fit into the one that didn't want you. The Chicago Public Library on State Street hummed with quiet activity as Lauren sat at a corner table, pretending to read a pregnancy book while her mind raced through 1,000 different scenarios. 2 days had passed since her conversation with Beckett, and Margaret Hayes' latest text had been impossible to ignore. "Please, Lauren, 1 hour. The Fairmont Hotel, Thursday at noon." Now, sitting across from Beckett's mother in the hotel's elegant tea room, Lauren felt like she was walking through a minefield, blindfolded. Margaret looked impeccable as always, cream-colored suit, pearls that probably cost more than Lauren's monthly rent, and that same brittle smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said, her voice carefully modulated. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Lauren admitted, setting down her menu. The prices made her stomach clench almost as much as her nerves did. "But Beckett seems to think we should talk." "My son has always been an optimist." Margaret's fingers drummed against the white tablecloth. "Even as a child, he believed the best of everyone, sometimes to his own detriment. And you think I'm going to hurt him?" It wasn't a question, and Margaret didn't pretend otherwise. She signaled the waiter, ordering tea with the kind of quiet authority that came from a lifetime of being catered to. "I think," Margaret said carefully, "that you come from very different worlds. That can create complications." Lauren felt her jaw tighten. "Complications like what exactly?" "Like the fact that you have no idea what it means to be part of a family like ours. The obligations, the expectations, the constant scrutiny." Margaret's voice remained level, but Lauren caught the steel underneath. "My son doesn't just belong to himself, Lauren. He belongs to a legacy that goes back 4 generations, and I don't fit into that legacy. Do you?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Lauren thought of her childhood, foster homes and free lunch programs, working her way through college while cleaning office buildings at night, the constant fear that one wrong move would send her back to square one. "No," she said finally, "I don't, but maybe that's not such a bad thing." Margaret raised an eyebrow. How so?" "When I was 16, I was placed with a family who seemed perfect on paper. Beautiful house, successful parents, 2 well-adjusted kids." Lauren's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "They took me in because it looked good, the wealthy family helping the disadvantaged child. But behind closed doors, they made it clear I was there on sufferance. I was expected to be grateful, to know my place, to never forget that I didn't really belong. And you think that's what we're doing, aren't you?" Lauren leaned forward, her eyes never leaving Margaret's face. "You're sitting here telling me about legacies and expectations, about how I don't understand your world. But you know what I do understand? I understand that your son is a good man who deserves to be happy. I understand that the baby I'm carrying deserves to be loved unconditionally, not judged based on their mother's bank account." The waiter appeared with their tea, the interruption giving both women a moment to regroup. Margaret poured with practiced precision, her movements elegant but mechanical. "Amanda understood our world," she said quietly, not looking up from the tea service. "She grew up with the same expectations, the same responsibilities. When she and Beckett married, it was seamless. And she died," Lauren said, more gently than she'd intended. "Margaret, I'm not trying to replace Amanda. I'm not trying to be her or live up to her memory. I'm just trying to build a life with your son, a life that doesn't include us." The words were spoken so softly that Lauren almost missed them. When she looked up, she saw something in Margaret's eyes that she hadn't expected. Fear. Not the cool disapproval she'd been preparing for, but genuine, vulnerable fear. "Is that what you're afraid of?" Lauren asked. "That I'll take him away from you?" Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "I lost my daughter-in-law. I lost the grandchildren I thought I'd have with her. I can't—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I can't lose my son, too." For the first time since sitting down, Lauren felt a flicker of sympathy for the woman across from her. "How, you won't lose him by accepting me, but you might lose him by forcing him to choose. And if I accept you, what then?" Lauren considered the question carefully. "Then we figure out how to make this work. We find a way to honor your family's traditions while making room for new ones. We raise our child to understand where they come from, all of where they come from, even the parts that don't include trust funds and country clubs." There was a hint of something that might have been humor in Margaret's voice. Lauren found herself almost smiling. "Especially those parts. Our kid is going to know that love isn't about pedigree or bank accounts. They're going to know that family isn't just about bloodlines. It's about the people who show up when it matters." Margaret sat back in her chair, studying Lauren with new attention. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone easier to dismiss." Margaret's smile was rueful. "Someone who would be intimidated by all this." She gestured around the elegant tea room and backed down. "Sorry to disappoint you." "You didn't disappoint me," Margaret said, surprising them both. "You challenged me. It's been a while since anyone has done that." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Lauren thought of Beckett, of the hope in his eyes when she'd agreed to this meeting, of the baby growing inside her who would need all the family they could give them. "So where do we go from here?" Lauren asked. Margaret picked up her teacup, her movements more natural now, less performative. "I suppose we learn to trust each other, one conversation at a time." "One conversation at a time," Lauren agreed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't the instant acceptance that fairy tales promised, but it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real. As Lauren walked out of the Fairmont Hotel that afternoon, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was finally building the family she'd always dreamed of. The nursery was taking shape slowly, like hope itself. Lauren stood in the doorway of what had once been her home office, watching Beckett wrestle with the instruction manual for a crib they'd picked out together. At 20 weeks pregnant, her belly had become impossible to hide, and with it had come a sense of urgency she hadn't expected, not just to prepare a room, but to prepare themselves. "I think we're missing a screw," Beckett muttered, pushing his hair back in frustration. Pieces of white wood were scattered across the floor, like puzzle pieces, waiting to form something beautiful and functional. "Or maybe you're just missing the point of the instructions," Lauren teased, settling into the rocking chair they'd found at an antique shop in Wicker Park. It had been her first compromise with Beckett's world, expensive enough to be quality, old enough to have character, practical enough to serve its purpose. "And says the woman who assembled that bookshelf upside down last month. "It's modern art now," she protested, one hand resting on her growing belly. The baby had been active today, little flutters that felt like butterfly wings against her ribs. At the ultrasound appointment earlier that week, they'd learned they were having a girl. The knowledge sat warm and terrifying in Lauren's chest, a daughter who would grow up in a world that would judge her for 1,000 different reasons. Beckett abandoned the crib and crossed to her, kneeling beside the rocking chair with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to read her moods. "What's that look about?" "What look?" "The one that says you're spiraling into worst-case scenarios." His hand covered hers on her belly. "Talk to me." Lauren was quiet for a moment, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood through the open window, children playing in the courtyard below, traffic humming on Clark Street, the normal symphony of people living their lives. "I keep thinking about what kind of world we're bringing her into." "Her," Beckett repeated softly. wonder still coloring his voice, even though they'd known for days. Our daughter. Your parents' granddaughter, Lauren added, the weight of that reality settling between them. What if she looks like me? What if your mother sees her and thinks, Stop! Beckett's voice was firm but gentle. My mother is trying, Lauren. You said so yourself after your lunch last week. It was true. Since their conversation at the Fairmont, Margaret had been making an effort, small gestures that felt monumental given where they'd started. A text asking about Lauren's doctor appointments, a recommendation for a pediatrician who had delivered half of Chicago's elite children. Yesterday, a package had arrived containing a hand-knitted baby blanket with a note. Every Hayes baby has one. This one is special. I made it myself. I know she's trying, Lauren said, but trying and accepting aren't the same thing. What happens when our daughter starts asking questions about why her grandmother's friends look at her differently? What happens when she realizes that half her family treats her like an outsider? Beckett was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. Outside, the late afternoon sun was painting everything golden, the kind of light that made Chicago look like a painting instead of a city that could break your heart as easily as it could make your dreams come true. Do you know what Amanda used to say about children? He asked finally. Lauren tensed slightly. Beckett rarely talked about his late wife, and when he did, Lauren never knew quite how to respond. She didn't want to compete with a ghost, but she also didn't want to pretend Amanda hadn't existed. She said children don't inherit their parents' fears. They inherit their parents' courage. He looked up at Lauren, his eyes serious. Our daughter is going to grow up knowing that her mother fought for everything she had. She's going to know that her father chose love over comfort. She's going to know that the best things in life are worth fighting for. And if people judge her, then she'll know how to judge them right back. Beckett's smile was fierce. Lauren, look at yourself. Look at everything you've accomplished, everyone you've helped, the life you've built from nothing. Do you really think our daughter is going to be anything less than magnificent? The baby chose that moment to kick, sharp and insistent, against Lauren's ribs. She gasped, pressing her hand to the spot. She's active today, Beckett observed, his hand joining hers. She's been like this all afternoon. I think she likes the sound of your voice. Smart girl. She's going to wrap me around her little finger, isn't she? Lauren laughed, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Probably. But that's what daughters do to their fathers. Speaking of fathers, Beckett stood, crossing to a bag Lauren hadn't noticed by the door. I have something for you, for both of you. He pulled out a small wooden box, old and worn, with intricate carvings along its edges. When Lauren opened it, she found a collection of items that looked like treasures from someone's childhood. A silver locket, a fountain pen, a photograph of a young couple standing in front of what looked like the same house where she'd had dinner with Beckett's parents. These were Amanda's, Beckett said quietly. Things she saved from her childhood, things she wanted to pass down to her children. He picked up the locket, opening it to reveal a tiny photograph of a woman Lauren recognized from pictures around Beckett's apartment. I've been carrying this around for 3 years, not knowing what to do with it. Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. Beckett, she would have wanted our daughter to have them, he continued. Not because she was my wife, but because she understood what it meant to create a family from love instead of obligation. She would have loved you, Lauren, and she would have been proud to have her memory live on in our daughter. The locket felt warm in Lauren's palm, substantial and real. She thought of the woman in the photograph, the dreams she'd had, the love she'd shared with the man who now knelt beside Lauren's chair. Are you sure? She whispered. And I've never been more sure of anything. Beckett's voice was steady, certain. Our daughter is going to carry the best of all of us. Your strength, my stubborn optimism, Amanda's compassion, even my mother's fierce protectiveness. She's going to be loved by people who chose to love her, not just people who were obligated to. Lauren closed the locket carefully, holding it against her heart. For the first time since learning they were having a daughter, She felt something besides fear. She felt anticipation, not just for the challenges ahead, but for the joy, for watching Beckett become a father, for seeing their daughter discover the world, for building the kind of family she'd never had but had always dreamed of. "I love you," she said, meaning it in all the ways those words could be meant. "I love you too. Both of you?" As the sun set over Chicago, Lauren rocked gently in the chair that would soon hold her daughter. The crib remained unfinished, the room still needed paint, and they had 1,000 details left to figure out. But the foundation was solid, built on love and choice and the determination to create something beautiful from the pieces of their separate lives. Outside, the city hummed with possibility, and inside, their daughter grew stronger every day. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, jolting Lauren from the restless sleep that had become her norm at 26 weeks pregnant. Beckett's phone buzzed against the nightstand with the harsh insistence of an emergency, and Lauren felt him tense beside her before he even answered. "Hayes," he said, his voice instantly alert in the way of someone accustomed to crisis calls. Lauren couldn't hear the words on the other end, but she could hear the urgency in the dispatcher's tone. Beckett sat up, running a hand through his hair as he listened. "I'll be there in 15, he said, already reaching for his clothes. "Make sure the paramedics stay back until we get the scene secured." "What is it?" Lauren asked, though she'd learned not to expect details. Beckett's job meant racing toward danger while everyone else ran away, and she'd discovered that loving someone who regularly put themselves in harm's way required a special kind of courage. Apartment fire on the south side, possible entrapment. He paused in pulling on his shirt, looking at her with eyes that held both apology and determination. "I'm sorry. I know you had that appointment with the contractor tomorrow morning." "It's fine," Lauren said, meaning it. They'd been planning to discuss converting the spare room into a proper nursery, but fires didn't wait for convenient timing. "Be careful." Beckett leaned over to kiss her forehead, his hand briefly touching her rounded belly. "Always am. I love you. Love you too." After he left, Lauren lay in the darkness, listening to the rain against the windows and trying not to think about all the ways his job could go wrong. At 26 weeks, their daughter was the size of an eggplant. According to the pregnancy app Lauren checked obsessively, she was strong enough to survive outside the womb now, though Lauren prayed it wouldn't come to that. Everything about this pregnancy felt precarious, as if happiness this profound couldn't possibly last. Her phone rang just as she was drifting back to sleep. Margaret's name appeared on the screen, and Lauren's first thought was that something had happened to Beckett. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she answered. "Margaret, is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to call so late, dear. I couldn't sleep. And I saw the news report about the fire on South Wabash. Isn't that where Beckett Station responds?" Lauren felt a wave of surprise. In the weeks since their lunch, Margaret had been making efforts to connect, but she'd never called this late, never shown this kind of immediate concern for her son's safety. "Yes, he just left for the scene," Lauren said. "I'm sure he'll be fine. He's very careful." "Careful?" Margaret's laugh held no humor. "That boy has been running toward danger since he could walk. When he was 7, he climbed onto our roof to rescue a cat that turned out to be perfectly capable of getting down on its own." Despite her worry, Lauren found herself smiling. "I can picture that. After Amanda died, I used to lie awake every night when he was on shift, imagining the worst. It nearly drove me to distraction." Margaret's voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way Lauren had never heard before. "I suppose I should ask, do you do that too?" "Every time," Lauren admitted. "I tell myself it's irrational, that he's trained for this, that he's good at his job, but then I think about raising our daughter alone, and I can barely breathe." "It doesn't get easier," Margaret said, "but it does get more bearable. You learn to trust that love is stronger than fear, even when fear feels like it's winning." They talked for another hour, sharing stories about Beckett's stubborn heroism and their mutual terror of loving someone whose job description included saving strangers. Lauren learned that Margaret had started volunteering at a women's shelter after Amanda died, channeling her grief into something useful. Margaret learned that Lauren had grown up in the foster system, that her strength came from having no choice but to be strong. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said as the conversation wound down. "I judged you before I knew you, and that was unfair." "You were protecting your son," Lauren replied. "I understand that now." "No, it was more than that. I was protecting myself from caring about someone else I might lose." Margaret's voice was thick with emotion. "But I've realized that caring anyway is what makes us human, what makes life worth living." Beckett returned home as the sun was rising, exhausted but whole. He found Lauren in the kitchen making coffee, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. "Everyone made it out," he said, pulling her into his arms. "3 families displaced, but no casualties. How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're home," she said honestly. "And your mother called in the middle of the night. Is everything okay?" "She was worried about you. We talked for a while." Lauren looked up at him, seeing the surprise in his eyes. "I think we're going to be okay, Beckett. All of us." He held her tighter, his hands splaying across her belly where their daughter was beginning to wake up, tiny movements that felt like butterfly wings. "I never doubted it, liar," she said fondly. "Okay, I doubted it sometimes, but not the important parts, never the important parts." Later that morning, as they sat together planning the nursery, while their daughter performed what felt like gymnastics routines inside Lauren's womb, Lauren realized that somewhere between Margaret's late-night call and Beckett's safe return, something fundamental had shifted. They weren't just expecting a baby anymore, they were becoming a family, messy and complicated and imperfect, but theirs. The storm outside had passed, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming. Inside their small apartment, surrounded by paint samples and furniture catalogues, Lauren felt something she'd never experienced before, the unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Their daughter kicked against her ribs, and Lauren pressed her hand to the spot, imagining the little person who would soon make their family complete. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, the future felt less like something to survive and more like something to celebrate. "What are you thinking about?" Beckett asked, following her gaze to where her hand rested on her belly. "Home," Lauren said simply. "I'm thinking about home." The contractions started during Lauren's 32nd week, sharp and insistent, while she was reorganizing patient files at Chicago General. At first, she dismissed them as Braxton Hicks, practice contractions that her doctor had warned her about. But when the third one doubled her over the reception desk, Janelle took one look at her face and reached for the phone. "Don't you dare call Beckett yet!" Lauren gasped, gripping the edge of the desk. "It's probably nothing. The baby isn't due for 8 more weeks." "Honey, your body doesn't care about due dates," Janelle said firmly, already dialing. Neither does that little girl of yours." 20 minutes later, Lauren found herself in a hospital bed in the maternity ward, wearing one of those awful gowns that never quite closed in the back, while Dr. Patricia Reeves checked her cervix with professional efficiency. "Well, the good news is you're not in active labor," Dr. Reeves said, pulling off her gloves. "The not-so-good news is you're showing signs of preterm labor. Your cervix has started to thin, and we need to take this seriously." Lauren felt her world tilt sideways. "What does that mean?" "It means bed rest, at least for the next few weeks. We're going to give you medication to help stop the contractions and steroids to help develop the baby's lungs, just in case she decides to make an early appearance." "Bed rest?" Lauren's voice climbed an octave. "Doctor, I can't. I have patients who depend on me. I have work." "What you have is a baby who needs you to slow down," Dr. Reeves interrupted gently. "Lauren, I've seen you around this hospital for 3 years. You're always moving, always helping someone, always pushing yourself to do more. Your body is telling you it's time to stop." The door burst open as Beckett arrived, still in his fire department uniform, his face pale with worry. "How is she?" "How's the baby?" "Both fine, but we need to be cautious." Dr. Reeves explained the situation, while Beckett moved to Lauren's side, his hand immediately finding hers. "Whatever you need," he said without hesitation. "I'll take leave, hire help, whatever it takes." "You can't take leave," Lauren protested. My job is to save people," Beckett said firmly. "Right now, that means saving you and our daughter. Everything else can wait." After Dr. Reeves left, they sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this new reality settling between them. Lauren had built her entire adult life around independence, around being the one who helped others rather than needing help herself. The idea of being confined to bed, of being dependent on others, felt like losing herself piece by piece. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what? Be helpless? Be the one who needs taking care of?" Her voice broke slightly. "I've never been good at that." Beckett pulled his chair closer to the bed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You're not helpless, Lauren. You're growing our daughter. You're doing the most important job in the world." "It doesn't feel important. It feels like I'm failing at everything." "Hey," his voice was soft but insistent. "Look at me." When she did, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "When I was 8 years old, I broke my leg falling out of a tree. I had to spend 6 weeks in a cast. Couldn't play baseball, couldn't ride my bike, couldn't do any of the things that made me feel like myself. I thought I was useless." What happened? My grandmother came to stay with us. Every day, she'd sit by my bed and teach me things: how to play chess, how to identify birds by their songs, how to braid friendship bracelets that I was too embarrassed to admit I enjoyed making. He smiled at the memory. "She told me that sometimes the most important growth happens when we're forced to be still." Lauren felt tears slide down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Beckett. What if something happens to her? Then we'll face it together." "But Lauren, 32 weeks, babies born at 32 weeks do well, really well, and our little girl is strong. She gets that from her mama." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Margaret appeared carrying a bag that looked like it weighed more than she did. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I brought supplies." "Supplies?" Lauren wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. Margaret began unpacking with the efficiency of a woman accustomed to managing crises. "Comfortable pillows, proper sheets, these hospital linens are dreadful, books, that pregnancy tea you mentioned liking, and proper pajamas." She held up a set of silk pajamas in a soft blue. "If you're going to be confined to bed, you might as well be comfortable." "Margaret, you didn't have to." "Nonsense. We're family now. This is what family does." Margaret's voice was brisk, but Lauren caught the emotion underneath. "Besides, I have experience with bed rest. When I was pregnant with Beckett, I spent the last month horizontal. Drove Charles absolutely mad with my demands." "What kind of demands?" Lauren found herself asking, drawn in despite herself. "Oh, the usual." Margaret's eyes twinkled with mischief. "And ice cream at midnight, books delivered from specific bookstores, having the furniture rearranged daily because I was bored out of my mind." She leaned closer conspiratorially. "I also made him paint the nursery 3 different colors because I couldn't decide what I wanted." Lauren laughed, surprising herself. 3 colors? Yellow, then green, then the palest pink, because I was convinced I was having a girl. Margaret smiled. "And I was wrong, obviously. But Charles never complained, not once." As Margaret continued unpacking and sharing stories, Lauren felt something she hadn't expected: gratitude, not just for the thoughtful gifts, but for the way Margaret was treating this crisis as something they would face together, as a family. "Thank you," Lauren said quietly when Margaret paused, "for all of this. Thank me by taking care of yourself and my granddaughter." Margaret replied, "And by letting us take care of you." Later that evening, as Lauren settled into her own bed at home, surrounded by Margaret's thoughtful gifts, she realized that maybe this forced stillness wasn't a failure. Maybe it was an opportunity to let others love her, to accept help without shame, to prepare for motherhood by learning that sometimes the strongest thing you could do was admit you couldn't do everything alone. Outside her window, Chicago hummed with its usual energy, But inside, Lauren felt a different kind of peace settling over her. Their daughter might arrive early, but she would arrive into a family ready to catch her. 3 weeks of bed rest had taught Lauren Thomas that stillness was its own kind of torture. She'd reorganized her bedside table 17 times, read every pregnancy book Margaret had brought her twice, and watched enough daytime television to qualify for a degree in soap opera dramatics. But on this grey November morning, as she lay in bed feeling the familiar tightening across her belly, she knew something was different. "Beckett," she called, trying to keep the alarm out of her voice. He was in the kitchen making breakfast, humming off key to a song she couldn't identify. "Can you come here for a minute?" The humming stopped immediately. Over the past 3 weeks, Beckett had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the subtle changes in her voice. The way her breathing shifted when a contraction was real versus when it was just her body practicing. "Oh, what's wrong?" He appeared in the doorway, dish towel still in his hands, his expression already shifting into the calm focus he wore during emergencies. "I think—" Another contraction cut her off, stronger than the Braxton Hicks episodes that had been teasing her for weeks. This one had teeth. "I think we need to call Dr. Reeves." Beckett was already reaching for his phone. "Now, how far apart?" 8 minutes, maybe 7. Lauren breathed through the tightening, her hand automatically moving to her belly where their daughter seemed to be responding to the urgency with increased movement. "She's been active all morning." "Smart girl. She knows it's time to meet her parents." Despite everything, Lauren found herself smiling. At 35 weeks, their daughter was considered late preterm, not ideal, but not the emergency it would have been 3 weeks ago. Dr. Reeves had been cautiously optimistic during yesterday's appointment, noting that the baby's lungs were developing well and her growth was on track. The next few hours passed in a blur of careful movement and controlled urgency. The ride to Chicago General felt surreal. Lauren had walked these halls as a physical therapist for 3 years, but being wheeled through them as a patient felt like viewing a familiar painting from an entirely different angle. "Room 314, the nurse announced, though Lauren already knew. It was the same room where she'd helped Mrs. Patterson recover from hip surgery last spring, where she'd watched Mr. Rodriguez take his first steps after his stroke. Now it would be where she became a mother. Dr. Reeves confirmed what Lauren already knew. She was in active labor, progressing steadily but not dangerously fast. "We're going to monitor you closely," she explained, adjusting the fetal heart rate monitor. 35 weeks is good, but we want to be prepared for anything." Margaret arrived before Lauren's parents could be reached, a fact that spoke volumes about how family was defined by presence rather than biology. She swept into the room, carrying a bag that seemed to contain half of Nordstrom's baby department, and immediately began rearranging furniture with the efficiency of someone who treated every crisis as a logistical challenge to be solved. "How are we feeling, dear?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Lauren's bed. "Terrified and excited in equal measure," Lauren admitted. "Is that normal?" "Completely. When I was in labor with Beckett, I kept insisting that I'd changed my mind, that I wasn't ready to be a mother yet." Margaret's smile was soft with memory. "Charles had to remind me that, ready or not, the baby was coming." Another contraction built, stronger than before, and Lauren found herself reaching for Beckett's hand without conscious thought. He was there immediately, solid and steady, his presence an anchor in the storm of sensations overwhelming her body. "Breathe with me," he said, his voice low and calm, "just like we practiced." They'd taken childbirth classes together, sitting in a circle with other expectant couples, while a cheerful instructor named Diana taught them breathing techniques and pain management strategies. At the time, it had felt academic, theoretical. Now, with her body taking control of the process, Lauren was grateful for every silly exercise they'd practiced. "I can't do this," she gasped as the contraction peaked. "You're already doing it," Beckett replied. "You're the strongest person I know, Lauren. You've got this." "We've got this," Margaret corrected gently. "You're not doing this alone." The labor progressed through the afternoon, each contraction bringing their daughter closer to the world. Lauren lost track of time, existing in a space between breaths where everything narrowed to the essential work of bringing life into being. Beckett never left her side, and Margaret proved unexpectedly useful, producing ice chips and cool washcloths with the timing of someone who understood that labor was equal parts endurance test and team sport. "She's crowning," Dr. Reeves announced, and suddenly the room transformed into organized chaos. Nurses appeared as if summoned, equipment materialized, and Lauren felt the final overwhelming urge to push. "One more, Lauren," Dr. Reeves encouraged. "She's almost here." With a final surge of effort that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than her physical body, Lauren pushed their daughter into the world. The first cry was thin but strong, indignant and beautiful, and when Dr. Reeves placed the tiny, perfect baby on Lauren's chest, time stopped altogether. "Hello, beautiful," Lauren whispered, tears streaming down her face as she took in every detail, the shock of dark hair, the impossibly small fingers that were already grasping at air, the serious expression that looked remarkably like Beckett's concentrated face. "She's perfect," Beckett breathed, his voice thick with wonder. His finger traced their daughter's cheek with reverent gentleness. "Absolutely perfect. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, a nurse announced. "Good size for 35 weeks. Margaret had moved closer, tears visible in her eyes for the first time since Lauren had known her. "She's beautiful, you two. Absolutely beautiful." "What's her name?" Dr. Reeves asked gently. Lauren looked at Beckett, seeing her own wonder reflected in his eyes. They'd discussed names for months, making lists and testing combinations, but sitting here with their daughter in her arms, only one felt right. "Grace," Lauren said. "Us Grace Amanda Hayes." Beckett's sharp intake of breath told her she'd chosen correctly. The middle name honored his first wife, while the first name reflected what this little girl represented: unmerited favor, unexpected blessing, the kind of love that transformed everything it touched. "Grace Amanda Hayes," Margaret repeated softly. "She's going to change the world, this one." As evening settled over Chicago and their daughter slept peacefully in Lauren's arms, the room filled with a quiet joy that felt almost sacred. They were no longer just Lauren and Beckett, no longer just a couple navigating the complexities of love and family. They were parents now, responsible for this tiny person who had already rearranged their universe simply by existing. "Thank you," Beckett whispered against Lauren's temple. "For what? For her. For us. For showing me that the best families aren't the ones you're born into. They're the ones you choose to build." Outside the window, Chicago sparkled with November lights, the city continuing its ancient rhythm, while inside room 314 a new story began. Grace Amanda Hayes slept peacefully in her mother's arms, unaware that she had just become the bridge between two worlds, the living proof that love could indeed conquer fear, and that some families were worth every moment of uncertainty it took to create them. The first month of Grace's life taught Lauren that everything she thought she knew about exhaustion had been merely theoretical. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in December, and she sat in the rocking chair they'd finally assembled, feeding their daughter while snow fell silently outside their window. Grace was thriving despite her early arrival, gaining weight steadily and developing the kind of strong lungs that made their neighbors acutely aware of her presence. "You're going to be a singer," Lauren whispered, adjusting the tiny bundle in her arms. "Or a politician. Definitely someone who knows how to make her voice heard." Beckett appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking up at impossible angles, carrying 2 cups of coffee like precious cargo. "How's our little night owl?" "Fed and content, for now." Lauren accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma that had become her lifeline. "She's got your stubborn streak already. Refuses to sleep more than 2 hours at a time. That's not stubbornness. That's intelligence. She knows good company when she has it." Beckett settled on the ottoman beside the rocking chair, his finger tracing Grace's tiny fist. At a month old, she was still impossibly small, but her grip was surprisingly strong when she latched onto his finger. "Your mother called while you were at the station yesterday," Lauren said, watching Grace's eyes flutter closed. She wants to host Christmas dinner. Beckett's eyebrows rose. Christmas dinner? At the house? With Grace? Apparently she's already planned the menu and ordered a high chair, even though Grace won't be eating solid food for months. Lauren couldn't hide her amusement. She said it's time Grace experienced her first proper Hayes family Christmas. The transformation in Margaret over the past month had been remarkable. The woman who had once questioned Lauren's place in their family had become Grace's most devoted grandmother, arriving with supplies they hadn't even known they needed, and possessing an uncanny ability to soothe the baby when nothing else worked. "And you're okay with that?" Beckett asked carefully. "I know Christmas has always been complicated for you." It was true, Lauren's childhood. Christmases had been a patchwork of foster homes and well-meaning but temporary families. Some years had been wonderful, full of unexpected kindness from strangers who opened their homes to children who had nowhere else to go. Other years had been exercises in survival, where she'd learned to make herself small and grateful for whatever scraps of celebration were offered. "This year feels different," she said honestly. "This year, Grace gets to experience Christmas with people who love her unconditionally. That's something I never had, and I want her to have it." Grace stirred in her arms, making the tiny mewling sounds that meant she was waking up. Even in sleep, she was expressive, her face cycling through expressions that reminded Lauren alternately of Beckett's concentration and her own determination. "She looks like you when she's thinking," Beckett observed, following Lauren's gaze. "Same little furrow between her eyebrows. She looks like you when she's hungry." Same single-minded focus. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter exist in that peaceful space between sleep and waking. These quiet moments had become precious to Lauren, not just because they were rare, but because they felt like proof that she could do this, that she could be the mother Grace deserved. "Dr. Martinez called today," Beckett said eventually, "and about the baptism. They'd been discussing having Grace baptized, though neither of them was particularly religious. It felt important somehow, a way of formally welcoming her into their community, of surrounding her with people who would love and support her as she grew." "What did he say?" "He suggested the first Sunday in January, said it would be a good way to start the new year." Beckett paused. "Well, he also asked about godparents." Lauren looked down at Grace, who had opened her eyes and was staring at her with the intense focus that babies brought to everything. "What do you think about asking Janelle and your brother David?" "I think that's perfect. Janelle's been like a sister to you, and David's been wanting an excuse to spoil someone rotten. Your parents will want to be involved too." "Of course they will. My mother's probably already planning the reception." Beckett's smile was fond. "She's discovered she likes having a project that involves tiny dresses and cake." As if summoned by their conversation, Lauren's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Found the most adorable christening gown at Marshall Fields. Can I bring it by tomorrow? Also, what are your thoughts on roses versus lilies for the altar arrangements?" "Oh, speak of the devil," Lauren laughed, showing Beckett the message. "She's in full grandmother mode. There's no stopping her now." Grace chose that moment to grab Lauren's finger with surprising strength, her tiny hand wrapping around it with the kind of trust that made Lauren's chest tight with emotion. This little person depended on her completely, trusted her to make the right choices, to provide safety and love and all the things Lauren had spent her childhood searching for. "Are you scared?" she asked Beckett suddenly. "About raising her? About doing this right?" "Terrified," he admitted without hesitation, "but also excited. I keep thinking about all the things I want to show her, all the places I want to take her. The museum, the lakefront, that little bookstore you love in Lincoln Park. I want to take her to the shelter where I volunteered in college," Lauren added. "I want her to understand that we help people not because we have to, but because we can, because that's what love looks like in action." "She's going to be extraordinary," Beckett said with quiet confidence. "Look at her parents." Lauren felt tears prick her eyes. The emotional volatility of new motherhood still caught her off guard. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "A family, a home, someone who stays." "I'm not going anywhere," Beckett said, the same promise he'd made in that Italian restaurant months ago, but deeper now, weighted with sleepless nights and shared responsibility and love that had grown more complex with each passing day. "Neither am I," Lauren replied, meaning it in ways she couldn't have before Grace arrived. Outside, Chicago slept under its blanket of snow, the city quiet in the way it only was in the deep hours of winter nights. Inside their small apartment, Lauren rocked her daughter and listened to Beckett hum softly, the same off-key melody he'd been humming the morning Grace decided to make her early entrance into the world. They were no longer the people they'd been when they first met in that emergency room. They were tired and overwhelmed and completely transformed by love, and Lauren couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "I love you," she said to both of them. Her partner and her daughter, her chosen family, her home. "We love you too," Beckett replied, and Grace made a soft sound that might have been agreement, or might have been the beginning of another demand for attention. Either way, Lauren thought, settling deeper into the rocking chair, it was perfect. 1 year later, Lauren stood in the same emergency room where she'd first met Beckett, but everything had changed. Grace babbled happily in her carrier, her chubby hands reaching for the colourful mobile Janelle had hung above the nurse's station. At 13 months, she was walking with the determined wobble of someone who had places to go and people to charm, and she'd already won over every staff member at Chicago General. "She's going to be trouble, this one," Dr. Martinez said, making funny faces that sent Grace into peals of delighted laughter. "Look at that smile. She's already got half the hospital wrapped around her little finger. Wonder where she gets that from," Janelle observed, appearing beside them with a knowing smirk directed at Lauren. "Some people have a gift for making everyone fall in love with them." Lauren felt her cheeks warm. It was true that Grace had inherited her father's charm and her mother's determination, creating a combination that was absolutely devastating to anyone who spent more than 5 minutes in her presence. But more than that, she'd inherited something Lauren hadn't expected, the unshakable confidence that came from being loved unconditionally from the moment she drew breath. "Mrs. Hayes?" A young resident approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in room 3. The patient is asking for you specifically." Lauren looked puzzled. She'd been on maternity leave for over a year, only recently returning to work part-time. "Are you sure? I haven't been treating anyone recently." "She said to tell you it's Elena Rodriguez. She specifically requested the physical therapist who helped her grandfather walk again." Lauren's face lit up with recognition. Mr. Rodriguez had been one of her favorite patients, a 70-year-old man who'd suffered a massive stroke and been told he'd never walk again. She'd worked with him for months, celebrating every small victory, until the day he walked out of the hospital on his own 2 feet. "His granddaughter," Lauren murmured. "What happened?" "Car accident. Multiple fractures in her left leg. She's scheduled for surgery tomorrow, but she's terrified she'll never dance again. She's a ballet student at Northwestern." Lauren looked down at Grace, who was contentedly chewing on a toy phone and watching the bustle of the emergency room with wide, curious eyes. "Can you watch her for a few minutes?" she asked Janelle. "Go," Janelle said firmly. "We'll be fine. Grace and I have some serious gossip to catch up on anyway." Room 3 was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. Elena Rodriguez was 19, with dark hair and the lean build of a dancer, but her eyes held the kind of fear Lauren recognized, the terror of losing the thing that defined you. "Miss Thomas." Elena's voice was small, uncertain. "My grandfather told me about you. He said you were the one who helped him believe he could walk again." Lauren pulled up a chair beside the bed, her voice gentle. "Your grandfather was the one who did the work. I just reminded him that setbacks aren't endings, they're detours. The doctors say I'll walk again, but they can't promise about dancing. Ballet it's everything to me. Without it, I don't know who I am." Lauren thought of her own journey. of all the times she'd believed that one mistake, one loss, one closed door meant the end of everything she'd hoped for. Can I tell you something? 2 years ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life would look like. I was wrong about almost everything, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. She talked to Elena about resilience, about the difference between the life you plan and the life you're given, about how sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unexpected soil. She shared stories of other patients who'd rebuilt themselves stronger than before, and she promised to be there for every step of Elena's recovery. When she returned to the nurse's station, she found Grace holding court in Beckett's arms, while he regaled the staff with exaggerated stories of their daughter's latest adventures. He'd arrived straight from the fire station, still in his uniform, and the sight of him with their daughter still made Lauren's heart skip beats. "How's our patient?" he asked, shifting Grace so she could reach for Lauren. "Scared, but determined. She'll make it through." Lauren took Grace, breathing in her baby scent mixed with the faint smell of whatever she'd managed to get into during Lauren's absence. "How was your shift?" "Quiet, thankfully. Mrs. Patterson from 5B locked herself out again, and we had to rescue Mr. Chen's cat from another tree, but nothing too dramatic." He paused, studying her face. "You look happy." "I am happy." And it was true. Standing here in the place where their story began, holding their daughter while surrounded by the people who'd become their chosen family, Lauren felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. "Ready to go home?" Beckett asked. "Home." The word still sent a warm flutter through Lauren's chest, not just because of the apartment they'd expanded to accommodate Grace's growing collection of toys and books, but because of what home represented: safety, permanence, the radical idea that she belonged somewhere without having to earn it daily. "Actually," she said, looking around the bustling emergency room, "I'm ready to come back to work properly. Not full-time yet, but more than I have been." "You sure?" "I'm sure. Grace needs to see that Mommy helps people, that we use our gifts to make the world better." She looked down at their daughter, who was babbling what sounded like a very important story to anyone who would listen. "And I need to remember that being a mother doesn't mean losing myself. It means expanding who I am." They gathered their things and headed toward the exit, Grace waving enthusiastically at everyone they passed, as if she were royalty, acknowledging her subjects. In the parking lot, Lauren paused and looked back at the hospital where her life had changed forever on a stormy night that felt both yesterday and a lifetime ago. "What are you thinking?" Beckett asked, following her gaze. "I'm thinking about storms," she said, "and how they're terrifying when you're in the middle of them, but sometimes they blow you exactly where you need to be. No regrets." Lauren looked at her husband. They'd married in a small ceremony 6 months ago, with Grace as their flower girl and Margaret crying happy tears in the front row, and their daughter, who was now trying to have a serious conversation with a nearby pigeon. "Not a single one," she said, meaning it completely. As they drove through Chicago toward home, Grace fell asleep in her car seat, and Lauren watched the city lights blur past the window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: sleepless nights, work demands, the constant juggling act of modern parenthood. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by love she'd never thought she deserved, building a family that chose each other daily, proving that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the courage to let someone stay. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but what it had left behind was everything Lauren had ever dreamed of, and more than she'd ever dared to hope for. In the end, that was what love was, not the absence of storms, but the presence of someone willing to weather them with you, and the faith that what you built together would be strong enough to last. The end. If you were Lauren, would you have given Margaret Hayes a chance after that disastrous first dinner, or would you have given up on Beckett's family forever? Your participation on the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.